Yeah, thank you very much. It's a special privilege to be here, and thank you for inviting me, because what we are witnessing has been a monstrous injustice. But those who have done their best to stop the genocide are being criminalised, and the criminals who put them there are now our Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary. I refer, of course, to Starmer and Lanning. And it's my fervent hope that no one will die on the hunger strike that has been waged in order to get the most basic of rights. I'm speaking on behalf of Jewish Network Palestine, so maybe I can just say a few words about the way that Jewish people have been misused in order to provide a moral alibi for the genocide that is taking place. As most of you will not know, that up to 1945, the majority of people, Jewish people, were not Zionists. Quite the contrary. It was the anti-Semites who were the Zionists. They wanted to be rid of the Jews in their midst, and what better way to do that than Zionism? And when the British imperialists in 1917, Balfour, Arthur James Balfour, who himself had introduced the Immigration Act in 1905, the Aliens Act, to keep Jewish refugees out of this country, the only member of the Lloyd George War Cabinet to oppose the Balfour Declaration was its only Jewish member, Sir Edwin Montagu. Zionism was always a quisling movement, and as soon as Hitler came to power, they reached a trade agreement, Havarah, which broke the Jewish and the Labour movement boycott of Nazi Germany. So Zionism does not represent any sense of Jewish fulfillment. On the contrary, as I said in 2019, and the Jewish Chronicle screamed and the police arrested me for saying it, that Israel is Hitler's bastard offspring. It is formed on the very same principles of racial supremacy as Nazi Germany operated, and there is no difference in principle between what Israel is doing with the Holocaust in Gaza and what Nazi Germany did with its own Holocaust. And I think that's important to remember. We're accused, and the Filton 24 are accused, of breaking the law. Let me just say one or two things about breaking the law, because it's not a bad thing really. When you think of it, the suffragettes broke the law in order to make a law. And that hypocrite who was Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, on the very same day that Palestine Action was prescribed, appeared in the House of Commons in the purple colours of the suffragettes.
Shame! Shame!
It is shame, but I don't think she really knows what shame means. Because if anyone was a terrorist, then it was the suffragettes. They tried to set fire to Lloyd George's house. They dragged cabinet ministers out of their cars. They bombed and burnt their way across England in order to get a very basic right, which was suffrage and the right to vote for women. When people say to you that you shouldn't break the law, then I ask, was Rosa Parks, should she have been condemned for sitting down in a seat reserved for whites only? Should Anne Frank have handed herself in because legally she had no right to be in Amsterdam? We can think of many, many examples where people broke the law because the law was unjust. And that is the point. When the law allows weapons to be sent to fuel a genocide, that law is wrong. And in practice, there is another law in this country, the International Criminal Court Act, which does make aiding a genocide a criminal offence. But the Metropolitan Police have chosen not to implement that law. They prefer the Terrorism Act, which is what I'm being charged under. And you know, I've looked at the Terrorism Act and its definition of terrorism. it completely excludes state terrorism. The only form of so-called terrorism it acknowledges is the terrorism, so-called, of the oppressed. And I'm accused of inviting support for Hamas. And I'll say it now, and I'll say it clearly. Whatever differences politically I may have with Hamas, they are not a terrorist group. They are a resistance group. And the Palestinians under occupation have a right to resist. And under the terrorism law, if it had been in operation in the 1940s, the French resistance and the Warsaw Ghetto fighters would also have been terrorists. And we know Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan considered the African National Congress to be terrorists. So terrorism is simply a political instrument. One man or one woman's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. No more and no less. So we should not adopt the terminology of our enemies. And I just want to reflect really on the events of the last week. There was a time, such as when George Bush invaded Iraq with Tony Blair, they said it was a war for democracy, which of course it wasn't. Donald Trump doesn't even bother with that. He invaded Venezuela to get hold of the oil. And who supports him? Keir Starmer. A complete violation of international law, because the supreme crime at the Nuremberg trial of Nazi war criminals was a war of aggression. And that's what we're seeing the United States engaged in today. Not only Venezuela, he wants to get hold of Greenland as well, and no doubt many other territories, so that we should be under no illusion that imperialism has shed every moral alibi and excuse for its own existence. It's simply naked death. And Donald Trump and Keir Starmer are the laughing bosses of capitalism today. So thank you very much for inviting me again and listening, and we will proceed to victory, because the Filton 24 will win, and we will win over and against the imperialist robber barons. Thank you.